The training looks good, but my dog is not food motivated. How's this gonna work? This is one of the most common comments that I get underneath my training videos. This is why today I want to discuss food motivation in detail. Now, the good news is that most dogs eat every single day. They just eat for free instead of for training currently. So by tweaking and fine-tuning a couple aspects, we can usually get them to take treats in training really nicely. Today, I'm going to share my top 7 tips for more food motivation with you. Let's get started. Number 1, you're not using the right kind of treats. If you walk into a pet store, the treats that you typically see first are not ideal training treats. Dogs once were predators, and as such, they love the taste of meat. They're less keen on the taste of flour, rice, different kinds of fruit and vegetables. And unfortunately, many of those treats that are typically sold as really good training treats contain a lot of those. I always tell my students, dogs do not want to eat bakery items. And here you can actually see my dog Party's reaction to being offered one of those treats. Now, I would not say that Party is a dog that is not food motivated, but he definitely is a dog that is not motivated by any kind of food. So, in order to offer treats that our dogs will really go crazy for, we should choose some that have as high of a meat content as possible, ideally 100%. Here are some nice freeze-dried options. And another kind of treats that I really like using is pre-made raw food. This is designed to be complete nutrition. That means that even if you train a lot with your dog, they will still get healthy, nutritious food. This is not doggy junk food, and dogs typically really love these kind of treats. Here you can see Party's reaction to being offered these. Number 2. If you have a dog who happily takes treats at home, but refuses treats in more difficult training situations, this is usually a question of the right progression. It's very normal that excited dogs lose their appetite, and it's actually the same for humans. If you're very excited, for example, before a first date or before a big presentation at your job, you probably also do not want to eat a big meal. The way that we can work around this is to advance the training difficulty really gradually. Let's say, for example, you have a dog who will happily take treats in your living room, but refuses treats if you try and train down the road or at the park. In this case, we would go back to the last successful step, which is taking treats inside the house, and then really gradually increase the difficulty of our challenge. This could mean training in the hallway with the front door closed. Training in the hallway with the front door just 1 inch open. Training in the hallway with the door a little bit more open. Progressing gradually like this until the front door can be completely open. Eventually, stepping through the door and training just outside the front door. Training halfway down your driveway. And so on. By the way, this is a really important dog training concept. If your dog can do behavior A, but your dog cannot do behavior B, that is essentially an advanced version of behavior A, you start with behavior A and then you increase the difficulty just in tiny steps. We never want our dog to think, okay, I can do this behavior, but this behavior is totally different, I cannot do it. Instead, we always start with the behavior our dog can do, and then we increase the challenge just so incrementally that they are always able to be successful until we get to that point B. Number 3, your dog is a little bit too heavy. More than 50% of all dogs in the United States are overweight or obese. And I have time and time again made the experience that dogs that are too heavy actually have decreased food drive compared to those that are normal weight. This does not really seem very intuitive. We might think a dog is overweight just because they love food so very much. But in fact, many dogs will just eat however much free food they get in their bowl. And a dog that gets much more food than they actually need in their bowl has less of an appetite when it comes to working for food in training. A really good way to check if your dog perhaps is a little bit too heavy is to run your hands down their sides. If you have to really push in to feel their ribs, or if you even cannot feel their ribs at all, even if you're pushing in, then your dog needs to lose a few pounds. In that case, you should work with your veterinarian to develop an adequate diet plan that gets your dog back to normal weight. I have seen so many clients in person and online whose dogs were too heavy, and once the owners were able to successfully decrease the weight, the dog's food motivation really went up. Because once they were not always eating way too much food, they actually had much more of an appetite that we could utilize in training. Number 4, your dog is being free fed. There are actually many dogs that do very well with free feeding weight-wise. That means they can always have food available and still maintain a very healthy weight. However, they usually have the tendency to just graze throughout the day. So in the morning, the owner might fill up their food bowl, and then the dog might take 1 or 2 kibbles here, eat them, go back later, eat a couple more kibbles, and so on. Again, this means they never really work up an appetite. Instead, they always top themselves off, They never truly become hungry or in need of food. They, in fact, probably never really feel a big appetite at all. Now, this really becomes a problem in training. If we have food and we want our dog to do something for that food, we need our dog to want that food in some way. If your dog truly never wants food because they can always have food as much as they want, it can be really hard to make training worth their while, especially in the beginning. So in these cases, I recommend, if you have a free-fed dog, that you just time the feeding a little bit better around the training times. For example, if you know that in the afternoon you're going to go to a dog training group class, then in the morning you could put down their food at 7 a.m., but pick it up by 9 a.m. so that the dog has some time to actually work up an appetite. Now, I want to be very clear here, this is not about starving your dog, but your dog's not going to starve if they do not have access to food for a couple of hours. We do not want to deprive our dogs of food. We do not want to make our dogs horribly hungry, but we do need our dogs to not be completely satiated either. Number 5, your dog is not being free-fed, but you do not time the training times well around the feeding times. If, let's say, your dog gets breakfast every day at 7 a.m., chances are that by 7:20 a.m., the dog might not have a huge appetite for training. In this case, we again want to be a little bit smarter with the timing of feeding and training. For example, you could just give your dog a couple of kibbles for their breakfast if you then want to train at 7:20. Or if you want to feed your dog their whole breakfast, then you should maybe have your training time at 11 or noon instead. So always keep in mind that the dog needs to want our reward in order for the training to be successful. The reinforcer needs to be something that the dog actually has a need for. If your dog is completely full, does not have any appetite, then even the best food might not entice them. Number 6, less common causes. While many dogs can really improve by using the last 5 tips, there are some dogs that seemingly still are really not motivated by food at all. And then we have to look a little bit more at the individual in front of us and figure out what might be going on. Here's an interesting story. I once was training with a really lovely couple and their little rescue dog. And the couple had the most perfect treats. They would bring duck hearts and other fancy treats like that to our training sessions. They would make sure to pick up the food a couple hours before the training session. And the dog still really did not seem interested in the treats at all. So we looked a little bit closer and saw that the dog was actually shying away every time they tried to deliver a treat. Now, it was a very small dog, so delivering a treat meant kind of bending over and hovering over the dog. This is something that can be very threatening, especially for small dogs. So with this dog, we taught her to hop up onto something, like an agility pause table or a fallen log or a boulder. And once she was up there, she would happily take the treats. So for her, this really wasn't a question of whether or not she was motivated by the food, but there were other factors that made the food delivery less fun for her. So if you have a dog that does not seem to improve by applying the last 5 tips, we definitely want to look at who that dog is as an individual and what else might be going on. Number 7. Medical causes. About once a week, I get an email from a follower that says something along the lines of, "My dog is really not food motivated. Sometimes they will refuse food for 4 or 5 days in a row. And then I have to force feed them with bone broth and rice. What can I do for training?" Well, if this is your issue, it is actually much bigger than food motivation. This is some serious medical issue that needs to be seen by a vet. If your dog is refusing food for days in a row, your main problem is really not that your dog does not want to learn a new trick. In this case, do not email me, do not leave a comment below. Please go and see a veterinarian so that they can help your dog. Alright, I hope this was useful. If you have any questions that do not relate to your dog refusing food for a week, please drop them below in the comments. I'm always happy to help and brainstorm what we can do to get your dog more food motivated. And now, until next time, happy training!